So what is up, my Ethereum brethren? Thank you all for joining today. And more importantly, thank you, Ethereal crew, for making this happen. This has been pretty incredible so far. And I think this is especially going to be an amazing conversation. The topic for today is Ethereum ecosystem growth. And most conference talks and conversations are typically a regurgitation of content, but I really hope we can use this time to actually make some progress with respect to this topic on the fly with the world watching, as opposed to just using this time to rehash things we already know. So please feel free to get super spicy and crazy and forward thinking with your questions and answers. And yeah, let's just generally try to have a good time while hopefully moving the needle forward. Before we go ahead and get started, I think it might make sense to do a brief round of introductions. I know we all know each other, but I'm not sure everyone else knows us. And we've got some really interesting folks here from a variety of backgrounds. And honestly, besides me, this is kind of a powerhouse of a panel with a bunch of hard hitters. So I'll be trying to mostly take a back seat. But yeah, let's quickly go around the horn and do 30-second or less intros to help shed some light on while we're all on this roundtable together. And I can go ahead and kick us off. So hey everyone, I am Billy Luedtke. I've been lurking in the shadows of the space for about 8 years or so. I helped build the blockchain consulting practice at E&Y, then later joined ConsenSys, where I currently reside. I've held a number of different roles here. I was the enterprise lead for Uport and a solutions architect and an enterprise advisor, and was also the founder of the Rapid team. But more recently, I've assumed the mantle of developer relations lead. So I've kind of had to step out from the shadows and do things like make a Twitter account and moderate panels and host podcasts and stuff. And so my goal right now is to help get us to 1 million developers and beyond. So yeah, that's me. And I will pass it off to the Chaos Wolf himself, my partner in crime and co-host of the Ethereum Hot Takes podcast, which is the newest and best podcast on the market, Mr. Kames.
All right. What an introduction. Yeah, so I won't go too long, but I was with ConsenSys for a couple of years, really started my journey off at Uport, working on decentralized identity, then transitioned to an internal experiment team at ConsenSys, just experimenting with everything. And as of recently have left, but still in the ecosystem, helping out a few people on this call, working with Kevin and 3Box doing some stuff, but was on 1 million devs as well and helping with Ethereum ecosystem growth. Are we doing nominations?
Yeah, nominate someone, Kames? Go for it.
All right. Let's go Austin Griffith.
What up? I'm Austin Griffith, kind of a builder in the space. I am now kind of working on this idea of developer growth, developer experience, user experience, and kind of I have it from both sides, right? So I tried for a long time and built a lot of things and failed, and hopefully from the other side of now I'm kind of in the Ethereum ecosystem, hopefully I can help provide a perspective to bring in more builders. I will nominate Kevin Owocki.
Thanks so much. If anyone who's a host wants to moderate the chat, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Owocki, and I am the founder of Gitcoin. Gitcoin is not a shitcoin. Gitcoin is a place where you can get coins in exchange for working on open source software. We have powered almost $5 million worth of rewards to software developers in the Ethereum space. I believe strongly that people should be able to pay their mortgage while they're working on open source software, and we're working to create that world, hoping that you can get coins for working on open source software. We are running the New York Blockchain Week virtual hackathon. So if you go to gitcoin.co/hackathon, you can actually earn tokens during the Ethereal Summit. I will nominate Mr. Rick Burton to go next.
Hey everyone, yeah, my name's Richard. I've been doing some design with different DeFi projects in the space, and particularly curious about anything that moves money around Ethereum. So yeah, excited to get into a chat.
Nominate someone.
Sorry, and we need Sina's left, right? We haven't heard Sina.
Hey, so I'm Sina Habibian. I previously led engineering at a project called TrueBit that was about scaling computation on Ethereum. More recently, I work at the Ethereum Foundation on ecosystem development, which spans a group of things. Amongst them is developer growth and developer experience. And I'm thinking about types of questions like how do we target different archetypes of developers, like university students, of which there are many in the space, international developers from around the world, like in China, India, Latin America. How do we push different types of projects like hackathons, partnerships, and different verticals like DeFi and gaming? So thinking about those types of things holistically at the EF and trying to do what I can. Is there anyone else left? John? Not
Just
you?
Moderate. You guys are all good.
Okay, sweet.
Awesome. Cool. So thanks everybody. To kick us off, I'll try to set the stage a little bit. I do have a bunch of questions prepared that I'd personally love to ask you guys, and I'll generally try to keep us on track, but I'd love for this to be kind of more of a roundtable discussion than a panel, since I know some people have some really spicy things that they want to cover. So please feel free to turn this into kind of a conversation and ask your own questions if you want. But just to kind of generally get the fire started, I'll kick off the conversation with kind of a high-level statement and a question. So we've seen a pretty tremendous amount of growth in the Ethereum ecosystem in quite a short amount of time. My first foray into Ethereum was about 6 years ago, right at the beginning. And in that time, we went from just kind of like a bunch of rumblings amongst a small group of starry-eyed nerds to kind of being a conversation piece among some of the most powerful people and institutions in the world. And in the early days of Ethereum, proactive ecosystem growth wasn't really a thing that anyone was doing or talking about. Like, marketing efforts were, to kind of put it lightly, like extremely light touch, if they even existed at all. And that was probably fine. We needed to kind of build something first because we needed something to grow. But now we've got a pretty strong foundation and some really good traction. You know, we've seen the explosion of DeFi and other things with real product market fit. And the sentiment with respect to marketing seems to kind of changed. There seems to be like an increasing recognition of the need to be proactive about getting others into the Web3 ecosystem and building on Ethereum instead of just building it and hoping they come. So to really kick this off, my first question to you guys is, and anyone can feel free to field this, and we can just kind of take the conversation from there. Are we still at the stage where we should just continue to build things and let growth happen organically through the maturation of the ecosystem and the evolution of the protocol and the development of products with product market fit? Or has Ethereum and both its protocol and application layer evolved to a mature enough state to warrant kind of more proactive and direct growth marketing and outreach efforts that you typically see emerge once a product or team or organization or technology has reached a critical mass? So at kind of a high level, what should be our approach to Ethereum ecosystem growth right now, given the current state of affairs? Get it, Kevin.
I'll step up and take a swing at that. So I think that I think that we're moving from an Ethereum space that started off with innovators and early innovation, and now we're moving to early adopters to maybe the late majority, and there's just a different profile there. I think that we should recognize that no one comes home at the end of the day and says, "Oh man, my day was so centralized." I think that we should actually use the properties of the Ethereum blockchain to solve problems for people who aren't in that 1% innovator club. And the reason why I'm really excited about the work that we're doing at Gitcoin is that if blockchain is going to be the internet of money, then most people in the world, their financial lives is their jobs, not their investments. And I think that DeFi is a really amazing trend. But I think that most people's intersection with money is their jobs. And so by providing a platform where people can earn tokens in exchange for doing work at a time when tons of people are out of work, I think that's how we're going to bring a lot more people into the Ethereum space, by actually solving a problem that they have, which is how do I make money with my skill set. So that's our strategy at Gitcoin. I don't opine on what the entire ecosystem should be doing. I can only tell you what Gitcoin's doing.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and just add to that real quick. Like, very much agree with that. I think even if ETH 2.0 was here right now and we could scale and there's plenty of transactions, like that doesn't necessarily equate to developers right away. And like, for me, when Web 2 really exploded, in my mind, is like when these content management systems like WordPress and Joomla and Drupal allowed people to make plugins and like make jobs for the developers. And I feel like until we have our moment where it's easy to create jobs across the board, it's really going to be, we should hold back on marketing until like we're ready to capture all those people. So until we get that, yeah, I'd say tone it down a bit.
Yeah, and one thing I like to focus on is where are the places where Ethereum is actually better than the existing world. So if you try and move dollars around the world and you interact with the ACH system and you use flat files and you upload them with file transfer protocol and you try and like reconcile all that, it's actually like a phenomenally difficult thing to do, to like move dollars from one bank account to another, especially if you want to do that across borders. And I think that's part of the growth of like stable coins and seeing these dollars fly around Ethereum, is that relatively speaking, a transaction on Ethereum is like a lot simpler to construct, a lot easier to do, a lot more developer friendly. And that to me is exciting because it's pointing towards certain things that we might be able to do way better than the existing systems. And we need to just, in my opinion, I'm just very excited by things that emerge like that. I'm not sure I can comment on what everybody else should be doing, but those are the things that excite me.
Maybe I'll hop into. So marketing as a word seems to have a negative connotation, maybe especially around circles of developers. But I think there are a large group of people in the world who could be interested in Ethereum, but just purely haven't heard about it or don't have the awareness of it. And this becomes clear as I have these conversations regularly where someone who's even aware of Bitcoin, say, and is a legitimate developer entrepreneur, thinks of Ethereum as basically similar to Bitcoin. It's a cryptocurrency. They don't know about the whole programmable aspect of it, that there's all these applications built on top. So I think there is an element of telling the story, and I think we could kind of see a shift in how we're telling the story, because to a certain point it had been focused on looking to the future with these idealistic visions of where this could go with decentralization and all the super interesting shapes that it could take. But we're actually at a point where you can take what's happened and more concretely like demonstrate what's been done. So DeFi is a good example of this. Let's like an app like Pool Together, for example, or Sablier, and these types of things that are just someone who's not in the space can actually see why this is interesting. And they're just not possible to build outside, without using this technology stack. And the fact that a company like Pool Together can deploy the smart contract and then start taking payments from around the world without having to manage bank accounts in different countries, having to deal with regulation, having to build up credibility and trust as a company, there's something really special there. So I feel like telling these stories is powerful. And then the other side of this, I think this is where growth or kind of awareness ties into developer experience, is that then, if you manage to get someone excited enough to want to spend that first evening or that first weekend hacking on something, then that's where the improvements to developer experience and stuff become super important. And that's another place where I've been really happy to see the progress. So, the fact that in smart contracts now we have console logs, we have stack traces, the times to run tests have gone down from an hour to minutes. There's stuff all across the board. Another recent project that's almost at the finish line is this GitHub repo called Aetherium Cryptography that wraps together all of the JavaScript cryptography requirements that there are. And so once and for all fixes all those node GIP issues that you run into as a developer. So there's just small things like this that if you manage to streamline someone's first touch point with the technology, then coupled with the awareness and growth, it can really unlock value. And that second bucket of things is what Austin's really focused on. So I don't know.
Dude, you just made me black out with the no JIP errors. Is it JIP or GIP? Whatever. There's no JIP errors. Holy cow. Days of my life. No, I think I totally, just to like echo a lot of what you guys have basically already said, is like, we have a story to tell. We're not shilling empty calories. There are things that Ethereum can do particularly better than anything else. Like, there are new things that we could do that we could never do before. And we need to kind of just nudge developers and show them, hey, look at this cool thing we have. And then when they come in, we don't want them to rage quit because our tools have no JIP errors and stuff like that. This is a really good panel. I'm glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on, man. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I think I'll piggyback off that a little bit. So I think our kind of approach to the narrative around describing the new things that have never been done before have up to this point they've been largely like extremely philosophical and revolutionary in their tone. And I think to some extent we're beginning to, I think one piece of it is obviously discoverability. I don't think everyone knows that story yet, but I think we're beginning to kind of almost exhaust that philosophical narrative. I think we need to kind of go beyond it to like Kevin Owocki's realm, where it's like, okay, great. Decentralization is great and all, but like I need to put food on my table. Or like, I think the thing that the average person cares about the most is like money. And so I think we need to now start thinking about how do we show developers kind of the opportunity in this space and the fact that they can make money, and by being part of this like new parallel financial system, they can be on the ground floor of like something amazing. And there's opportunity beyond just like decentralize all the things. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Products, man. I just keep thinking about products. Instead of thinking about Ethereum, like forget about Ethereum and let's talk about like what's on top there that's interesting and what is earning people money, and like the interesting part is not the utility underneath, it's what people are doing with it to me.
I feel like it would help to dig in more to the developer and like actually break it down into there's different developers, right? It's not one kind of archetype that describes the whole thing. And so recently I've been digging into the gaming space, where I think there's a lot of potential alongside DeFi, for example, as a place where things could really get to that early product market fit, because generally it's a space of early adopters. The risks for the stakes for taking a risk and things, being wobbly are lower than if it's like financial application. And I was just talking with Peter at Horizon Games, who are building Skyweaver, and they've just built an awesome app that allows users to trade cards, build like all the stuff we've talked about are kind of starting to happen. And there are also additional things like around that. For example, a point he made that resonated with me was that as a player of these games so far, say on you only indirectly had the ability to monetize your gameplay by, say, streaming on Twitch and building a following. But now if you play a game like Skyweaver, by doing well in the game, you win these cards that then you can go and sell on these other external markets. So, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I also feel like there is maybe a bit of a threshold effect in that you can do marketing as much as you want, but what will be most effective at the end of the day is if you get one or two applications to actually get to product market fit and show what's possible, and then the floodgates open. And that's, maybe similar to if you look back to the ICO boom. It's not the best thing that happened in the space, but as soon as one person does an ICO and raises millions of dollars, then that's all it takes to attract the energy. And in that case, it went into this weird direction. But in the case of gaming or DeFi, these first applications can really unlock people's imagination.
Yeah, and I think like, so I wanna direct this at Rick actually. So I feel like we currently do have some things emerging with true product market fit for the first time. And I think that's all these DeFi protocols. And, like we're seeing negative interest rates around the world. Like instead of like losing money for storing it in a bank, you can just buy a stable coin and earn, 5% interest on it instead. So given the fact that we do have, I think, some things with product market fit, do we think that they're mature enough to the point where we should try to get the masses in, or why do we think we're not seeing, like, we're seeing adoption, but we're not seeing larger scale adoption of these DeFi protocols? Is it just too early, or is there anything that we can do?
One sense that it's probably too early is that nearly every single one of them has been hacked by a kind of part-time security researcher who's a student in Canada. And, if we're at the stage of development where one chap, and if you don't know who this is, his name's Sam Zun, and he's the kind of white knight of the industry, who, thank goodness, he's a good human being. And so we're so early that even the developer practices and tools and like security processes for releasing and maintaining smart contracts are just being kind of formalized and kind of explored and talked about now. I think that probably the set of people that are capable of writing a secure pipeline of smart contracts and delivering them on Ethereum that can process kind of hundreds of millions of dollars is probably fewer than 50 people. And if you think about that as a developer pool, it kind of speaks to why things are taking some time, right? And why things keep getting compromised. The weirdest thing about compounding returns on all fronts is that even if it grows 5% a year for a few years, it's just it will start to turn the corner. So the contrast that I draw is like when I was spent a bit of time at a company called Stripe, and there the founders had to jump through probably 1,000 to 3,000 hoops before they got access to the banking rails in Wells Fargo. And they needed like kind of the masters of Silicon Valley to kind of usher them through into the financial system. And you contrast that with all the kids we see building crazy derivatives and options and put pools and interesting new financial instruments. They don't need the permission to get started. And as a result, you just see a much more diverse set of opinions of what a financial system should look like. So I'm still optimistic and thinking less about how to get more people in and more about like, how could we have like 100 DeFi Lego bricks that we could trust? Because once we have that, then I'd feel more comfortable kind of thinking about the marketing question. Right now, I absolutely would not recommend my like family or close friends or anyone start playing with some of these protocols, because it seems to be about one every 2 weeks just gets blown to pieces. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I think there's like a beyond DeFi we have to focus on too, right? Like it's not just about like we're highlighting here. What we're seeing is this permissionless extensibility, right? We're seeing how the composability is our superpower. So it's not even just DeFi, but what we can do with that composability.
100%.
Yeah.
And to piggyback, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I think that, the DeFi stuff is great. And I think that the Lego stuff is great. I just wanted to point out to everyone that there's maybe a massive opportunity that there's going to be a huge shift in consumer preferences over the next several months. And I'm looking at the New York Times right now, and the unemployment rate is at 15%, the worst since the Great Depression. People need help, and we have financial technology that can help people and can reach anyone in the world. And so, I think that, one take might be how are we going to help people at a time in which 15% of, at least in the United States, really needs help? And to me, the answer just comes back to jobs. Train people to be software engineers, train people to be competent in this technology, and show them that there's a new world that we're creating.
I want to ask a question on that. So, since it is trying to get more people in here, and obviously, we have this idea of 1 million devs now, what is missing then to get those people trained as quick as possible? Like, obviously we have a lot of tutorials and documentation all over the place, but what are some of those key things that you think would really accelerate that?
Well, I mean, clearly the answer is to retweet me every time I tweet about a Gitcoin virtual hackathon.
Obvious.
Oh, sorry. I just went into chill mode. I'm sorry. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's about drivers and barriers, right? So, the barrier to get into the space, you have to understand private key management and MetaMask and all those things. And those are the barriers, and we should absolutely lower those. But the more that we can increase the drivers, let people know that there's a career opportunity worth hundreds of $1,000 plus a year salary. Let them know that they can earn tokens that they can actually pay their mortgage with by working on this technology. They'll figure out how to get over the barriers. And so, I mean, I think that, clearly this is in my own interest to push Gitcoin's virtual hackathons. Those are, we're doing 6 virtual hackathons right now with $100,000 plus in prizes to get people to have more drivers to go into the space. But that's only one mechanism. The quadratic funding stuff that Gitcoin's been doing with Gitcoin grants, I'm going to run a quadratic funding round in downtown Boulder with bookshops and coffee shops and local businesses. And that's an insanely ambitious thing because, Main Street people don't care about, they don't care about Ethereum. But if you can put it in a context where it's going to help them, where there's a driver for them to actually give a shit, then I think that that's the answer. And the 2 examples that I have with Gitcoin is quadratic funding for downtown Main Street and more virtual hackathons. But everyone in this ecosystem, I'm sure that there's a ton of more ideas of how we can increase the drivers, not just lower the barriers.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So it sounds like we need to present the map of what's possible for people really to jump in. Like, they don't know to go from A to B, here's the path. You saying first go here, set up your Gitcoin account, then maybe get a Fortmatic, and then try this out and really lay that out. And that's a solution for getting people in?
I'd say the engineer in me agrees with you, and engineers love the how and the what. I'm talking about the why. What's the deep why people should give a shit about Ethereum? And I think that the answer is that we're cutting out is that there's actual financial opportunity. The grass is greener in the internet of money, and there's an opportunity for you. And then you can figure out Fortmatic and all that other shit. I love Fortmatic, but all that other shit.
Cool.
Kevin, I have a follow-up. So I've been thinking about this too. And I agree that the opportunity of getting a job in this space is probably the most interesting way of pulling people in. And then the question after that is, what are the companies that are hiring? And the question behind that is, how do these companies make money and grow and sustain themselves, right? And so far there's been, there was the original round of token sales, and there's been a few good VCs backing companies in the space. But what are you guys' thoughts on companies being able to sustainably grow, and specifically how the experimentation with business models is going? Because to me, it seems like that's an engine that enables developers to come into the space and actually land at these companies.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Gitcoin's burning money every month. So maybe don't I'm on the business models ETH Magician's Ring. I'm very passionate about it. I have this whole theory about how we're going to have new business models that are enabled by cryptoeconomic primitives. But, so far it seems like every VC I pitch just wants to know how the SaaS model's going. So, I think that maybe the aspirations are a little bit ahead of what the reality is. I'm really bullish on quadratic funding and the idea that we can fund people who are providing value in the space using mechanisms like quadratic funding and source cred. But it would be it would be remiss to not mention that the ICO wave is gone and it's probably not coming back. So we need a new scalable way of funding a lot of these projects. And quadratic funding is the best answer that I have right now. It's given out $2 million in the Ethereum space in the last 18 months. So that's the only tangible answer that I think that I can offer right now.
So one cool thing that I recently kind of started diving into, and me and Kames actually talked about this yesterday, but it's protocol level royalties for like smart contracts. So like a percentage of transaction fees, instead of going to miners or validators, it goes to the deployer of the smart contract. Do you guys think that there's anything there? Like, should we design maybe or draft an EIP around that? I think like protocol level rewards might get a little bit weird because there might be these legal ramifications, because then, every smart contract deployed is generating revenue, and then you have like income and you like need to report that. So that might get a little bit weird, but do you guys think there's any merit to having kind of application layer or like smart contract layer and not protocol layer royalties?
Well, one thing that I'm seeing is a lot of DeFi protocols are in a gigantic battle for liquidity, right? If you want to put your capital in one place, then you're necessarily kind of not depositing it in the other place. And I think what we're going to see is mechanisms among different competing financial protocols who wish to attract developers who have user interfaces that have money to kind of put their money in there, and they will be earning fees. The 2017 wave was largely a bust because the implied valuations of many of these tokens was in the kind of hundreds of millions or billions, and the amounts raised were in the kind of tens to hundreds of millions, and it was just a gigantic like overpromise and underdeliver. I think what we're seeing now is, and my focus is entirely on DeFi, is financial systems that are generating economic throughput, that have assets deposited, that are returning interest to people. And those are starting to generate fees, which will then be passed through to token holders. And so as a token holder, you can start to calculate a kind of discounted cash flow. You can start to look at the risks, and you can start to govern something that's actually generating economic value. And one of the most impressive teams in this space, I think, is Compound, where they used venture capital to get started, and then they're rolling out their token to the users and the funders of the system. And some really interesting dynamics are going to emerge there. And I'm just excited about when the kind of economic throughput of something like Compound, which is a money market, goes from kind of hundreds of millions to billions to maybe tens of billions, because at that point there should be revenue flowing from the protocol to developers who integrate with it, and that I think would be a very exciting kind of economic trend. And we saw this in the internet, right, where everyone was just confused about the business model, and then it was like, oh my goodness, searching for something and then putting an ad next to it is God's greatest business model. So I'm optimistic, but it takes time.
Yeah, we could start by maybe just taking what works in Web 2 and porting it over to the more efficient blockchain system. So SaaS models and ads power Web 2. And so it'd be pretty easy to just take those business models and transport them into Web 3. And then I predict, and hold me to this, in the next 5 to 10 years, we will find a new fundamental business model that's enabled by the paradigm of blockchain technology. And maybe we'll push over to that in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's kind of some of this, and I think that to me, like there's a lot that we don't know, right? There's a lot of this utility that we're talking about, and we're talking about these products popping up, but there's a lot here that like I don't even know what's going to happen, right? We got Rick with this galaxy brain going on behind us here. Like some crazy stuff is going to happen from this, but I don't know yet exactly even what the why is. So I'm like Kames. I spent a lot of time thinking about the how, and I think Sina and Kevin, you guys are right. Like the why is going to be probably the most important thing here. We just got to make sure that the how is also really easy to navigate.
Yep.
And I think I think there's almost merit in even just building to attract users to your platform. I mean, some companies maybe need to think about revenue right out of the gates because of investor reasons or because they don't have runway. But I think we're seeing like the most successful things are the ones that don't try to monetize early. Like Uniswap, like they didn't do a token, and like now they're taking off. And the things that just tried to get traction before you can figure out the business model a little bit more down the road, I think, in a lot of scenarios. So maybe that's what we see. Cool.
I do feel like we've been beat up a little bit by the bear market over the last 18 months. If we were having this conversation 18 months ago, the answer would probably be, yeah, tokenization. Just raise $5 million. It's easy. This isn't blind faith, but history doesn't repeat itself. It does rhyme. We are going through the Bitcoin halvening this week, and the crypto, Bitcoin is sort of the reserve asset of crypto. And I do think that if token prices start appreciating again, then maybe we can kick the can on the business model stuff for another 18 months as we go through another macro cycle. This is a speculative space, and we are on the bleeding edge, but it would be insane to note that we are going through a halvening, and that typically is followed by another bull market as we're trying to figure out. Sina, you said it best. Jobs require companies that are going to pay them, requires business models that are going to work. And I think that, that's the cycle that we're sort of spinning through. If we go through another round of investment, and then I think that we can kind of make some advancements in spinning that wheel without having to completely solve the problem. And that's the nature of capitalism: fear and greed, back and forth, investment, and I think that I'm hopeful that 2021 is going to be a really good year for the Ethereum space.
And I think that's actually even just an answer generally to Ethereum ecosystem growth. I think that's one variable that we do need to consider, and it will play a factor, is number go up. And I'm pretty confident this is not investment advice, but I think we're kind of entering maybe a bull market, especially due to there's the culmination of all these different factors that are kind of price increasing factors. And I think generally, as you see a number go up, that just brings so many more new eyes to the space. So I think we're probably going to see an explosion of new user and developer interest. And I want to make sure that we're ready for that. And is there anything we need to do in the immediate term to prepare for that, especially as Ethereum, because we have all of these kind of now legitimate competing layer one protocols launching. Is there anything that we can do as Ethereum to try to capture some of that market share as new people flood into the space via this new wave of price increase?
I'll go ahead and throw in my cards here a little bit. So I think we definitely need more boilerplates for setting up businesses. Not to eat away from Kevin's Gitcoin, market, but if somebody could spin up a localized Gitcoin for bounties just in their region and do that really quickly, and they can suddenly create a local job market and have that done in a day and a half. For me, it was that's why I got into open source, because open source allowed me to make money real quick and get a job. And I think more of these turn kit opportunities that we can create for developers will just attract those people naturally, because the faster you can get set up, the faster these people are going to be.
Yeah, and we have obviously the biggest market share on Ethereum right now, and we have the largest amount of value on top of our protocol. And I'm just wondering, how do we use that to our advantage to how do we leverage that capital and that value to make sure that kind of people flow our way? Or is it even important that we try to do that? Or should we just let them enter the Web3 space and figure things out for themselves?
I think this notion of the price going up, bringing a ton of people into the space is real. And then that begs the question of what types of things can we do to, if the price going up is going to, 100x, be 100x more effective than any kind of marketing growth thing we do in bringing people into the space, and we have some intuition that the price is going to go up at some point, then what can we do to prepare for that? And I think part of what comes to my mind is obviously the infrastructure that it takes to build both the products and the businesses, like people have been saying. So the better our tools are, the better the security infrastructure is, the educational resources are, the more effective the people who get into the space will be at doing the types of things they get drawn to. And I also think there's this interesting thing about there are almost memes or sets of ideas that capture the imagination of the space in different periods of time. And in 2017, this was token sales. Right now, it's maybe DeFi, and the people who get into the space will naturally get drawn to working on these types of things. And part of the reason there is that it's hard to imagine what you can credibly do with this technology, even if it can go in many different directions. So you start by taking what's happening and riffing on it and iterating on it. And so I think another thing that is important to do is to try to pave these new paths of things that are adjacent to DeFi. So DeFi is awesome, like it's happening. Then like gaming is another thing that people can go into. All the, community quadratic funding, that type of stuff is really interesting. And so I think paving these mimetic paths is an important thing to do before another bull market happens. And then lastly, around your point of other blockchains, I think it's good to not be complacent, but at the same time, I think the defensibility of Ethereum is due to multiple layers of network effects that are like really interwoven into each other. And it's not really about, you launch a platform and something will happen, because there are, all of these DeFi apps that are live. They each have liquidity. There's composability on multiple layers, right? So there are the tools that are all composable, right? So you can, even the standards are composable, right? Like something like ERC20 that any kind of token can implement this standard and immediately be accessible by every wallet and every exchange. That itself is like a huge moat, right? Or the fact that there are that the community is composable. So there are these, the ETH Global hackathons and the different meetups, and so I think there's a lot more to this ecosystem than, So I would say basically that I would, and this is similar to startups in general, is that most failures are self-enforced rather than due to competition. So I'd say just focus on what we're doing and try to do the best that we can instead of thinking about competition. That's my intuition around that.
Yeah. The two thoughts I wanted to mention is that, first of all, I hope that we don't ever spend our time focusing on number go up on the price of Ether, other than it being a result of more demand for Ethereum services and services that run on top of it. And the other point that I think is really key is that the lived experience for most people who bought Ether is number go down, right? Nearly everybody got in at the kind of $300 to $1,500 bull run in terms of the number of people, not the kind of amount of Ether. And so the vast majority of people have a bitter taste in their mouth when they think about this ecosystem, because it went through a huge process of over-promising and under-delivering. And so as the demand for Ethereum services increases, and so the demand for gas increases, and hopefully the price of Ether rises because the services are getting more valuable, it definitely behooves us to kind of make a really good story and explain, okay, here are 5 things that are totally different from 3 years ago in 2017. But those are just some of my thoughts and my sense from when I talk to people who may have participated by buying something but not participated by using anything.
I've got a question. So I think a lot of people are generally aware of Bitcoin, and they're much less aware of these other layer 1 protocols. So as we see number go up, people will ultimately probably trickle into Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin experience, like at least for me, it's like not that good. Like the wallet UIs are not as good as Ethereum wallet UIs. 10-minute confirmation time kind of sucks. I think a lot of people will avoid that because they'll just be operating via Coinbase. But for me, like my holy shit Ethereum, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, and I just double cursed. But like the aha moment for me for Ethereum is like actually interacting with it. And like DeFi protocols don't click for me until I actually go to Maker and open the CDP or go to Synthetics and stake some synths. And it's like, once you do that, it's like, oh my God, this is pretty incredible. This is the future. So how do we get people past kind of the Bitcoin hurdle? Like I'm going to coin that right now. It's
why
like
do they have to
hurdle.
even jump that? Like, why are they even jumping the Bitcoin hurdle? Why aren't they just going to use a product that's like powered by one of these technologies, right? Like you said, what you're doing is going there and having that experience, right? We should be able to give that experience without anybody ever having to jump over the Bitcoin hurdle.
That's a good
I
point.
just wanted to cuss to make you feel better too, but I didn't.
Thanks, dude. Anyone got any random curse words? Yeah, I think that's obviously the ultimate end goal. Like, and I think we've known that for a while. The crypto, the eventuality of it is we need to get to a point where the user experience is so good that nobody needs to know what Ethereum really is. They just like do things on the internet and they interact with these apps, and behind the scenes it's just Ethereum making things better and more effective and more efficient and allowing us to do things that we previously couldn't do. But I do think that, I mean, there's some things that kind of obfuscate that away already with product market fit, but I still think that we're somewhat far away, and we need to attract developers to build those things. And so we need to like think a little bit about how we give developers that Ethereum experience, so they're interested in coming in and building that for people.
So I mean, I think
totally.
Go ahead, Austin. Oh, okay. I don't know what you're doing, but I think that, you know, the sort of like left-brained part of me is like really into this. Like, yes, developer experience, and we should build better products. And but I think that like the community organizer in me thinks a lot about just like meeting people where they are, creating a container for them to have a social experience, and if they're crypto curious, then being their friend and meeting them where they are and providing a community event for them to learn about Ethereum is the way you start. If you make several friends in the movement, I think you're way more likely to get pulled down the rabbit hole. And we're in a place, I'm going to come back to coronavirus. I know that I shared the unemployment numbers earlier. We're in a place where there's going to be a massive reaggregation of consumer preferences in the next 6 months. I mean, I don't think this COVID stuff is gonna end. I think that remote work is going to be at the forefront. A lot of people aren't going to reopen up offices. A lot of software engineers just got laid off from Lyft, Uber, Airbnb, all these sharing economy apps, and they're trying to figure out what their next opportunity is. And you know, the community organizer in me says, you know, reach out to your friend that got laid off, host a meetup, invite new people to it, and hit people where they actually have a problem. And so I guess like one way to focus this discussion would be, how do we take just a narrow slice of, let's call it 100,000 software engineers that have been laid off in the last month and a half, and how do we market Ethereum to that set? That's maybe a really opportunistic question, but I think that it might help focus the discussion as well.
Dude, that's perfect. All right, so you have a friend. He just got laid off at Uber. You have 10 minutes to shill him. You have 2 minutes to shill him. You have to send him something. What is it? What do we lead with? Like, what's our strong game?
I mean, I don't think you lead with shilling at all. I think you lead with listening about, you know, like what's happened, because they just went through a layoff, right? But you know, I do think there is an opportunity. Well, whether or not we can present Web3 as a growth area right now is a question. But based off of how that listening goes, I think there's an opportunity to slide a little ether in there and to talk about how it's going to be a growth area in the next decade.
So more like just philosophically plant the seed at this point.
I think one of the pitches I've been making is, you know, with the web, it's like rapid ship, go as fast as possible. Whereas I think with smart contracts, it's probably an obsession with correctness. and formal verification and security practices and extreme thoroughness. And I do think that there's a set of engineers who would have gone into web development, but might find that kind of unfulfilling to constantly just be rapidly shipping half-baked stuff, and might find the kind of process of crafting like a system that is impervious and where it feels much more like kind of firmware or hardware development than it does rapid software development. That seems to appeal to a very interesting set of nerds who, I think, if you can make the case to the communities around kind of formal verification and functional programming and all these kinds of things, that finally their obsession with correctness in their code is like extremely valuable over here, and we really need your help, then you might be able to attract, if we can go from, say, 50 extremely competent smart contract engineers to like 5,000, that would be really good. I've always found that kind of million devs thing is a beautiful, like a messianic goal, but I still have barely met 10 who have shipped code that hasn't been hacked. And that's like kind of concerning to me. So I hope that we could expand that set. Yeah, but we'll see.
You dug into something about external developer environments. And I think that's the best part. Like we should be doing cool things that are cool to external JavaScript guys. We should be doing things that bring in Ruby developers. Like what is cool to a Ruby developer, and what kind of cool stuff can we do with Ethereum that might pull them in? I don't know why I picked Ruby. Why did I pick Ruby? I don't know.
So I want to take a little bit to get back to what you're saying about like what we should chill, because I agree with Kevin. Yes, we should listen and we should hear and be empathetic, but I also think this is an opportunity to show a path forward. And for this entire call, I don't think we've mentioned and shilled DAOs. And I think DAOs are like really interesting. Personally, I don't think we should call them that necessarily to new people. But like shout out to Raid Guild, which is making an opportunity for people who maybe are just getting into this workforce and only can like work part-time and looking for a community. Because I know personally now that I've like left this ConsenSys conglomerate, I'm now also looking for communities to collaborate with people and like see what's going on and finding new projects and like searching for a home. And I think it's important that we really demonstrate like there are homes for people to kind of capture themselves in, build that community. So I would love to see a stronger stance on like shilling DAOs, but in the sense of maybe like a co-op. Like you kind of, we re-bring that around and show that it's possible to rebuild these worker-owned collectives in a way.
That's a really good point. And I want to quickly piggyback off of that and say, it seems like up until now, Ethereum has been the community has been very conducive to the low level protocol type players. So like they can go to ETH magicians and ETH research and like talk about EIPs and stuff, but there hasn't really been a home for everyone else. and I think like Raid Guild and Metacartel are like a really good like now community that has emerged to provide a home for these people. But I think we do need to do a better job of kind of saying, hey, like you don't have to be like deep into mathematics and like crazy low level code to participate in this ecosystem. We just want everyone. And we need like this launching point where people can land. And I think we need like a home for them. And then we also need tools to get them up and started, like up and running very quickly. And I know Austin, like, do you want to like show some of the work that you're doing? Because I think you're doing some really cool stuff on that front.
Yeah, word, dude. Yeah, just like prototyping, right? Like so eth.build and scaffold ETH, we're just trying to put together something that someone who comes in or someone within the last 6 months who has landed can just grab and use and feel like at the end of it that they've like started, right? You've started building on Ethereum, right? I think that's a really key piece, is just get people in the door and get them feeling like they have like the potential energy to create something. I think that is what I'm working on with Scaffold ETH and ETH.build. This is really, there's been like some really cool trade-offs here where we've talked about, well, number go up is good because it brings in developers, but number go up is bad because we don't want it to go up too fast to give the, to oversell or, and then there's, it's wonderful how decentralized everything is, and also a huge curse for all of us because we can't give someone like a central path to bring them through. We can't, there isn't going to be the one thing. And that's an interesting thing to just kind of hit on. And there's so many frustrations with how we handle things because it's all different. It's different people doing different things. There's no central authority here. And that's just how it works.
Yeah, and sorry for interrupting your unmute, Kevin. I saw that happen, so I'll pass it to you after this. But I want to make a quick comment. Like that was a big problem that I saw, and that's why I designed the 1 Million Devs website in the way that I did. Was like when a person comes to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm interested in Ethereum. Where do I go?" I'm like, well, you go to ethereum.org and Reddit and Twitter, and then like you go over here for this and you go over here for that, and then there's events on Meetup, and then there's also these ETH Global events, and like I want to just be able to like, oh, you're interested, you go to this one spot, and that it's like an aggregator of aggregators. It's like you can find everything that you need at this one spot. And so I mean, I don't think 1milliondevs.com is the end all be all, but like I think we got to start thinking about that more, like building just one. Even though we are decentralized, people can like aggregate things that they're most, I guess, like they know the most about. But then we need this like launch pad where it's like one single spot where it's just like, okay, you're interested, go there, and you'll find everything that you need.
It should be Ethereum.org developers, right? I mean, like totally. If you ask somebody, that's probably what they're going to say right now. I think that's what it is right now. If I had to pick, like, what is the Schelling point? To me right now, in my mind, it's probably Ethereum.org/developers.
And that's like from an SEO perspective, even that's going to be the first thing that people find. They're going to find Ethereum.org. So like that website should be the spot. So maybe we need to like evolve it into accommodating.
It is too. Yeah, I think Sam, I have lots of updates from Sam all the time. So awesome. I think they're working on that stuff a lot.
Kevin, it's all you.
Yeah.
One of the parallels I think a lot about in order to sense make about what's happening with the Internet of Money is to think about what happened with the original Internet. The parallel is obviously the original Internet allowed you to move information across a computer network without an intermediary. And so it changed everything that touches information in society, media, entertainment, politics. The Internet of Money allows us to move money in scarcity across the Internet. So it can change everything about banking and financial instruments. And so that's why I use the Internet as a prior. But one of the things that I was thinking about is that AOL was like the front page of the Internet for an entire generation. And they just like littered the world with AOL CDs. And I'm not saying we should do that with Ethereum. I don't even have a CD player, I don't think. But, I do think that the one thing that's interesting about AOL to me is that they had a business model. They were an ISP, and that's how they financed the blanketing the world in AOL CDs. And I think that one of the things I'm going to look for is who's the AOL of crypto. I think Coinbase is probably the closest right now to being the AOL of crypto, but maybe AOL isn't a great primer either because they collapsed in a spectacular fashion and got bought out by Time Warner. But one guide, I guess the TLDR, my point is that looking at the Internet as a prior is a great way to sense make about building the Internet of Money.
100%. All right, great comment in the chat. Let's go around the horn. Give us your 30-second spiciest take on like literally whatever you want. Rick, I'll nominate you to go first.
Okay, I've got a term for people who spend far too much time worrying about regulation and fitting into the existing paradigm. And unfortunately, I call them knee benders. And I just think it is one of the most pervasive things I'm seeing in this ecosystem is that everybody screams regulation, regulation, regulation. I just do not care at all, as long as you are honest and treat people with respect and raise a sensible amount of risk capital. And so, when you look at Airbnb or Stripe or Uber or just almost any of these companies, Plaid, there's so many different fintechs. They broke a litany of laws. They literally just ran rotten shed around all this regulation because they had to build something that customers wanted. And I think that there's so much debate and so much exhausting kind of focus on the SEC and like what they may or may not do. First of all, someone in the world is going to do it anyway. So it might as well be done in America or in your country because it's on Ethereum, it's open source, and it's going to get published. So I'm really exhausted by all these people who screech regulation from the rooftops. I think if you're building something honestly, you're not damaging people and you're not mis-selling. You actually have an enormous amount of leeway with all of the regulators. And I'm fed up of the knee benders. They can jog on.
Love it. You want to nominate someone?
Kames. Let's see it. Let's see it, Kames.
No, I was not. I did not want to get nominated.
Sorry. All right. Kevin then. With Kevin.
Yeah, sure. I'm tired of talking about what we should do. And I think that people should be framing, instead of we should, they should be saying I am. I'm fucking tired of debating what we should do. I want to have a bias towards action. If you don't have a GitHub commit graph that looks like this, then you can jog on, to use Rick's parlance. I'm going to use an air horn to accentuate my point. Oh, it didn't work. All right, never mind.
Close enough.
It ships code, but it has a broken horn.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll put in a patch for it really quick.
Who's up next, Kevin?
Spicy take. I'm going to nominate Mr. Bowtie over here and see what he's got.
I'm not too spicy. My spiciness is like keeping myself in check and doing a gut check of like, am I just is this a problem looking for a solution? You know, like, are the trolls right? Have the trolls finally got to me? My spicy takes are always like saying what the trolls say to me, but to myself alone quietly. And who knows if I even have pants on right now, right? Do you guys have pants on?
Wow, that's spicy.
How's that spicy?
Austin, I'm going to get a couple drinks in you at the next Steve Global event we go to, and I'm going to record a spicy take and get it on Twitter, because I know you have it in you. You want to nominate someone?
Yeah, I want to hear what Sina has to say. Like, he's been clairvoyant on stuff that I'm like really interested in. So let's see what kind of spicy he can bring up.
I don't know if I'm spicy either, but I definitely agree with Kevin's feeling of like, let's just do stuff. And this is just like a really fun space. So have fun working on whatever attracts you. And yeah, I think we're good. Maybe I'll pass it on to Kames.
Low spice level.
Where's
low
the spice?
spice?
Kames is out. Kames has no spice.
We've had a 45-degree downward slope for the spice level.
Yeah, the spice. It must flow.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right, Kames, you're up. We're going to put you on the spot. Just go to Anti-Prosthesis Twitter account and just read one of his tweets. It's
does he actually write anything? I thought he just retweets.
All right, I don't know if this is related or not, but you know, Rick asked me to ask where ConsenSys should go and what direction that should take, and so I think that's spicy enough, as ConsenSys is a big player in the game, and as someone who just left, you know, it's a shame that ConsenSys didn't really invest into really figuring out products from the get-go. You know, we threw 1,000 people at the problem and didn't really think about like the product level and like what it takes to really build those teams decentralized and do that. And I think if ConsenSys to last, it really has to reinvest into that scope and really kind of figure out if the new direction it's taking is one that kind of like hits that note. So that is about all I got for ConsenSys hot spicy takes, but yeah, we'll leave it there.
Kevin, where's the air horn?
I'm working on it.
All right.
You can tell I'm working on it.
I heard a noise, right? I heard it make a noise.
Yeah, it was just like not a good like point accentuating air horn.
I see.
All right, I'm gonna put it back on you, Billy. Since Billy, yeah, well, Billy's the moderator. I want a spicy take out of him, not to put him on the spot, but let's hear it.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, my spicy take is people got to stop. I mean, we got to stop going down these crazy rabbit holes that we don't need to go down. Like, we don't need, you know, Shamir secret sharing and like ZK snarks and optimistic rollups to build cool. I was going to curse. Cool stuff. Like you look at Roll, all they do is they let you deploy an ERC20. It's like pretty simple. It took us like 6 years to get to that point to get someone to build that. But like, we can build cool stuff now. We don't need to like solve these hard technical challenges. And I know that like engineers like going down and solving these hard technical problems. Great. And we need to do that. Of course, like we got to solve like these infrastructural problems and, you know, work on scalability and privacy, but also at the same time, like make sure you're building for users. And like, just think about what a user would want when you're building a product. We don't need these crazy features or crazy throughput or crazy scalability. Just like build shit that works and people want. So that's my spice to take.
You guys, this was great. I selfishly don't want it to end, but really appreciate it for everyone that attended, and especially to the panelists. You guys rocked this. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Happy Friday.